Morning, everybody. There are new calls and growing calls for a second special counsel from Republicans. Trey Gowdy making the case. It's time to find out exactly what happened with potential FISA abuse at the Department of Justice. And a special prosecutor, he argues, may be the only way to get those answers. As we say good morning, hope you had an awesome weekend. I'm Bill Hemmer, live inside of America's Newsroom. I know you did.
It was good. Welcome back, Bill. Good to see you this morning. All right, Monday, here we go. I'm Sandra Smith, and we're also waking up to reports this morning that Robert Mueller has subpoenaed documents from a new witness connected to many Trump team members. Meanwhile, House Oversight Committee Chairman Trey Gowdy is saying a second special counsel may be unavoidable.
I don't think the Inspector General himself can answer all of our questions. Some of these witnesses have already left the department, which means the Inspector General does not have jurisdiction. Congress has proven itself incapable of investigating this FISA abuse. DOJ should not be looking into it. We need an independent arbiter. That's either the Inspector General or special counsel.
Peter Ducey is live on Capitol Hill for us this morning. Peter, how many witnesses does Gowdy think are no longer with the Justice Department?
Sandra, he says 24. That means that Gowdy thinks there are up to 24 people who could help crack the case of Obama-era FISA abuses who are no longer at the Justice Department, which means that they are no longer reachable by the Justice Department Inspector General. And now other Republicans here on Capitol Hill are joining Gowdy in calling for a second special counsel.
We cannot have the people currently at the Department of Justice and FBI investigate themselves. That's why Jim Jordan and Lee Zeldin and so many Republicans have joined me in calling for a second special counsel so that we can actually have some consequences for these very bad acts that the American people have learned about.
And President Trump has already laid into the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, for leaving the Inspector General, who the president calls an Obama guy, in charge of the FISA abuse investigation. So far, Sessions has dismissed the president's complaint, but again, there are now plenty of other Republicans asking Sessions to do the same thing that the president is asking him to do.
And Peter, what do we know about the special counsel Robert Mueller expanding his election meddling investigation?
The new reports, Sandra, are that Mueller no longer thinks that Russia may have been the only country that was meddling in the election. The New York Times had an item this weekend that says that the special counsel Mueller is trying to see if the United Arab Emirates may have attempted to funnel cash to the Trump campaign in exchange for favors later through a middleman named George Nader. Now, that is not a name prominently associated with the campaign until now, but Axios is separately reporting that Mueller is looking for any and all communications between 10 of the better-known campaign advisors, including longtime security guard Keith Schiller, Carter Page, Corey Lewandowski, and the president himself. Sandra.
Peter Ducey, thank you.
Analysis, Byron York, chief political correspondent, Washington Examiner, on a Monday morning. Byron, good day to you, and thanks for being here. Good morning. So they say the Justice Department cannot investigate itself. Where does this go, Byron?
Well, this is all coming from the Nunes memo, the Republican House Intelligence Committee memo that came out a few weeks ago, which showed that the Justice Department, FBI, actually did use the dossier to get a warrant to spy on Carter Page. And, you know, there's a conflict, there's an argument between the Republicans on that committee and the Democrats. The Democrats say, well, they only used it a little bit, and the Republicans said, well, they used it a lot. But basically, the fact that they used it is a very big deal for these Republicans, and they say they need to find out how that happened.
Here is Nunes, as you mentioned, they're making his case. Watch here. Listen, rather.
I welcome anybody to come help investigate, because so far it's only the House Intelligence Committee Republicans who are actually doing anything to get to the bottom of who was colluding with Russia. And the more we peel this back, we have clear evidence of collusion, but it's not between the Trump campaign, it's between the Democratic Party and the Hillary campaign and the Russians.
So he's been making that case for some time. Is he getting traction on that, Byron?
Well, the explanation behind that collusion accusation is that the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee paid for an operation in which Kremlin-connected Russians supplied damaging information about Donald Trump. They supplied that information to a foreign agent, that's the former British spy Christopher Steele, who compiled the dossier, and then an opposition research firm working for the Clinton campaign and the DNC spread that information from the Russians to a number of people in the press here in the United States, hoping to influence the election. And so that is what Republicans mean when they say there is collusion. And it ties to what we were just talking about, because that dossier ended up being used by the FBI to get that warrant. And I think one of the things you're seeing both with Nunes and with Trey Gowdy, whom you heard from earlier, is a frustration with Congress's ability to investigate this, because they've been trying for quite a while, many months now, and they've been stonewalled at various times by the Justice Department or the FBI. That word, by the way, stonewalled,
we've heard that from Paul Ryan, too.
Is Paul Ryan's word.
Quickly, Brian, I'm going to squeeze in this other story. What is Bob Mueller looking for with the list of documents from the list of people going back to November of 2015?
Well, not surprising that he would be looking for documents from people connected to the Trump campaign in late 2015. If you remember, it wasn't a very big campaign at that time. But what we don't know is this connection with the United Arab Emirates. Is there some other sort of thing? Does that somehow tie to Russia? You got to remember that Mueller was charged with investigating or continuing the counterintelligence investigation into Russia's efforts to influence the 2016 election and any matters that might arise directly from that. Now, that phrase, arise directly, has a lot of weight on it. We don't know exactly how Mueller thinks this might be connected to Russia in the 2016 campaign, or whether he's gone off in an entirely different direction. That has been known to happen with special counsels before.
We have seen that. Thank you, Byron. Quick analysis there from
you,
DC.
Bill.
Thank you. Nice to have you back. 6 minutes past the hour now.
A growing showdown over trade. President Trump now defending his controversial plan to slap tariffs on imported aluminum and steel, saying it's time to put America first. Here's former White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci on that.
He's playing a much longer game. What he's looking at is 71 years of uneven trade deals since the end of the Second World War. We put that in place, frankly, to help the rest of the world grow and create a middle class around the world. But it's had a deleterious effect on the American worker. We've lost 70,000 factories since NAFTA. Things like that are what the president is really concerned about. All he's really asking for is symmetry on these trade deals.
Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is live with the latest on all of this. John, good morning.
Sandra, good Monday morning to you. Punitive tariffs against foreign imports of steel and aluminum set to take place, go into effect later on this week or early next week. The president tweeting this morning, quote, "To protect our country, we must protect America's steel. America, space first." Mr. President, you got to put those words together to make the hashtag. Just wanted to point that out there. The president suggesting there could be some relief for Canada and Mexico if talks to renegotiate NAFTA bear fruit. Also tweeting this morning, quote, "We have large trade deficits with Mexico and Canada. NAFTA, which is under renegotiation right now, has been a bad deal for USA. Massive relocation of companies and jobs. Tariffs on steel and aluminum will only come off if new and fair NAFTA agreement is signed." That would seem to suggest that the threat of these tariffs is a negotiating tactic, at least when it comes to Canada and Mexico. Peter Navarro, the director of trade and industrial policy at the White House, though, says this is not a negotiating tactic. Listen here.
The purpose of the tariffs is to defend our steel and aluminum industries. Make no mistake of it. I understand if we get a great NAFTA agreement, and Ambassador Lighthizer is trying to do that, that would be a great thing for the American people. But at this point in time, 25% on steel, 10% on aluminum, no country exclusions, firm line in the sand.
Well, Navarro says there will be no exclusions for specific countries over the weekend. He said individual companies could apply for exemptions for certain products. The president, of course, campaigned on a pledge to protect American steel and aluminum and tweeting last night, quote, "We are on the losing side of almost all trade deals. Our friends and enemies have taken advantage of the U.S. for so many years. Our steel and aluminum industries are dead. Sorry, it's time for a change. Make America great again." Not sure what that is on the screen, but not what I was reading. The president says that a trade war is easy to win, but he gets some disagreement on that from Josh Bolton. He was the chief of staff for Bush 43 back at the time, just after they had slapped massive tariffs on steel. He is now the head of the Business Roundtable and says winning a trade war is not as easy as the president is making it out to be. Listen here.
The tweets by the president, including a tweet about responding on German autos on Friday, suggests that he thinks a trade war is easy, that it's winnable. It isn't. nobody wins a trade war, especially in these globalized days, the United States, when we're so dependent on goods coming in and going out for our competitiveness.
And Bolton knows what he's talking about after President George W. Bush slapped that 8 to 30% tariff on foreign steel. Some 9 months later, the United States had to rescind that, Sandra, because there was evidence that it was hurting American industries and the economy.
We will see where all that goes, John. And meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will be at the White House today.
Yeah, his second time here at the White House, the 5th meeting overall with the president. They met in Israel, a couple of other conferences as well. It's an opportunity for Netanyahu to get away from Israel. He is the center of corruption investigation there. Some of the most recent news is that his spin doctor is now in talks to turn state's evidence, which a lot of people are seeing as potentially bad for Netanyahu. Netanyahu himself was interviewed by the police on Friday. Iran is going to be top of the agenda in a visit that's scheduled to last just a little more than 3 hours here at the White House. Not expecting any movement on Middle East peace, though. And the two of them are not making a public appearance, so we don't get a chance to put questions to them today, unfortunately. Sandra?
We'll see. as usual, right, John? You never know.
Yeah, things could change.
Things could change. John Roberts, thank you.
A lot on the table, too, happening in the Middle East, too, so that's coming up here. In the meantime, we have 11 minutes past the hour now. Breaking news on a historic meeting from North Korea now. Senior officials from South Korea meeting in person with dictator Kim Jong-un for the first time since he took power. Is there a breakthrough on the table? General Jack Keane analyzes that coming up in moments.
And ISIS threatening a major U.S. embassy. How police may have prevented another Benghazi-style attack. Plus,
we did exactly what we think we needed to do. And in fact, that discussion with between President Obama and President Putin, we believe, was very impactful on the Russian actions.
That is former Obama Chief of Staff Dennis McDonough rushing to defend his team's response to Russian election meddling before the vote. But now there is new reaction from President Trump just coming into America's newsroom. That story is next.
A Fox News alert, media outlets in Turkey reporting police have detained 4 suspected ISIS militants in connection to a possible plot on the U.S. embassy there. The suspects, all Iraqi nationals. The embassy announced it was closed to the public today due to an unspecified security threat. The embassy is advising American citizens there to keep a low profile and stay away from large crowds.
Breaking news from the Korean Peninsula today. Fox News confirming South Korean officials meeting with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un today in person. Meanwhile, President Trump talking about his contact with North Korea, saying this over the weekend, Saturday night, quote, "I won't rule out direct talks with Kim Jong-un. I just won't. As far as the risk of dealing with a madman is concerned, that's his problem, not mine." Fox News senior strategic analyst, retired 4-star General Jack Keane. And General, good day to you on a Monday. So there's a lot of action on this. What do you make of it?
Well, first of all, I think talks are good. South Korea certainly is going to represent their own interests, but I'm sure they're going to put a place card on the table that if you're going to make progress here in negotiations, you're going to have to do it with the United States. And that absolutely is a fact. And I think our condition is we only want to talk with the North Koreans if the discussion on the table is denuclearizing North Korea. Now, where the North Koreans are really coming from and why they want these weapons clearly is because they want to preserve their regime. So what their negotiation bottom line is, don't take down our regime. The evidence of that would be pull out of South Korea entirely, United States. But we're not going to do that. But is there some trade space between pulling out of South Korea and also denuclearizing your weapons? And can we convince you that we are never, ever going to invade